The meeting room on the Federation station was cold. Not cold in the way humans understood cold, but cold in design. White walls, white floors, white light that came from everywhere and nowhere. Park sat at the long table and tried not to shiver. His captain sat beside him with her back straight and her face calm. She had been in worse rooms than this one. Across the table, the Federation ambassador moved his many legs in a way that might have been nervousness or might have been boredom. His name was, and he belonged to a species that looked like very large insects, had learned not to stare. "We are pleased to welcome humanity to the Galactic Federation," said. His voice came from a translator device around his neck. "This is a great day for your species. You have much to learn from us." Captain smiled politely. "And perhaps you have something to learn from us as well." Made a sound that the translator did not convert. Perhaps it was laughter. Perhaps it was something else entirely. "We have prepared a welcome package for your species," continued. "It contains maps of all known space, territories of member species, trade routes, and zones of interest. We hope it will help you understand your place in the galaxy." A small device was pushed across the table. Picked it up carefully. Inside this little object was more information than humanity had gathered in its entire history of looking at the stars. He felt the weight of it in his palm and tried not to show his excitement. The meeting continued for several hours. There were many rules to discuss, many agreements to sign, many promises to make. By the end, his head hurt from concentration, but he had the device and that was what mattered. Back on their ship, the Steadfast connected the device to the main computer and began to explore. The maps were beautiful, stars upon stars upon stars, connected by lines that showed travel routes and colored by regions that showed who controlled what. He could spend years studying this and never see everything. But one area caught his attention almost immediately. Near the center of a major junction of trade routes sat a large region marked in deep red. The color meant danger. The label read simply, "Expanse, uninhabitable, no recovery possible." Pulled up more information. The expanse was a cluster of dying stars surrounded by gravitational anomalies, radiation storms, and debris fields so thick that ships could barely move through them. According to the records, 17 expeditions from 12 different species had entered the expanse over the past 40,000 cycles. None had returned. He read through the expedition reports. The first few were confident, even arrogant. Experienced crews with advanced ships, certain they could succeed where no one had tried before. Their final transmissions were all the same: distress calls that cut off mid-sentence, or silence that stretched into eternity. After the 9th failure, the Federation Council voted to quarantine the region permanently. No species was to enter. No rescue missions were to be attempted. The expanse was closed. Stared at the map for a long time. The expanse sat right in the middle of 3 major trade routes. Whoever controlled that region could influence a huge portion of galactic commerce. It was the most valuable piece of real estate in the known galaxy, and everyone had simply given up on it. He took his findings to Captain. She studied the data in silence, her eyes moving across the screens with the focus of someone who had spent 30 years reading tactical information. When she finally spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "They stopped trying 40,000 cycles ago," she said. "That is a very long time." "Their technology has improved since then," said, "but they never went back." "Fear is a powerful thing." Captain leaned back in her chair. "Once a species decides something is impossible, they rarely question that decision again." "We could question it." The captain looked at him. Her eyes were sharp, calculating. Had served under her for 5 years, and he still could not always tell what she was thinking. "We could," she agreed, "but we would need permission from Earth Command, and we would need to be very careful." She sent the request that night. Earth Command responded within 2 days. "Permission granted. Proceed with caution. Report all findings." Before they departed, Captain informed Ambassador of their intentions. The diplomat went very still when he heard their plan. "This is not advised," said. "The Expanse has claimed many lives. Your species is young. You do not understand what you are attempting." "We understand perfectly," Captain replied. "We are attempting to go somewhere dangerous. Humanity has been doing that since we learned to walk." Made that strange sound again. This time was certain it was not laughter. "The Federation cannot stop you from entering unclaimed space," said. "But we will not send rescue ships when you fail. Your deaths will be your own responsibility." "Understood." The Steadfast entered the Expanse on a Tuesday morning, Earth Standard Time. Always remembered that detail later, though he could never explain why it mattered. The first 6 hours were terrifying. They lost 2 reconnaissance drones to radiation bursts that appeared from nowhere. The gravitational anomalies pulled at the ship constantly, forcing the pilot to make corrections every few seconds. An uncharted asteroid field appeared directly in their path, and they nearly collided with 3 separate rocks before finding a safe route through. But they adapted. The pilot learned to read the gravitational patterns. The engineers adjusted the shields to handle the radiation. The navigation team mapped the asteroid field and found paths that were merely dangerous instead of deadly. 3 weeks later, the Steadfast emerged from the Expanse with a full sensor log and a crew that was tired but alive. Wrote the official report himself. He kept it short and simple, the way Captain preferred. Challenging conditions. Recommend further study. Potential for permanent installation. They transmitted the report to the Federation database as required by the Welcome Agreement. Imagined Ambassador reading those words and felt a small, quiet satisfaction. The Federation had said no one endured there. They had been right in a way. No one had endured there before, but humanity had just changed the meaning of no one. And they were only getting started. 18 months after the Steadfast returned from the Expanse, humanity came back. This time, they did not bring 1 ship. They brought 47. Chief Engineer stood on the bridge of the construction vessel Hammer and watched the fleet move into position. Around her, the chaos of the Expanse swirled and burned. Radiation storms lit up the darkness like angry ghosts. Gravitational waves pushed and pulled at the ships, making them dance in ways their designers had never intended. Somewhere in the distance, a dying star collapsed a little more, sending tremors through the fabric of space itself. Smiled. She had been waiting her whole career for a challenge like this. Her team was the best Earth had to offer. 200 engineers, scientists, and specialists who had volunteered for what the Federation called a suicide mission. They knew the risks. They had read the reports of the 17 failed expeditions. They had studied every death, every mistake, every final transmission that ended in screaming or silence. And they had come anyway. "All ships in position," her communications officer reported. "Construction zone is clear. We are ready to begin." "Then let us begin," said. The work started immediately. The first task was to establish a stable zone within the chaos. The gravitational anomalies made this difficult. Every time they thought they had found a calm area, the patterns would shift and the zone would become deadly again. Lost 3 survey drones in the first week just trying to map the movements. But patterns existed everywhere, even in chaos. It took her team 2 months of constant observation, but they finally understood the rhythm of the Expanse. The anomalies moved in cycles, like tides on an ocean. They could not be stopped, but they could be predicted. Han, the logistics officer, developed a rotation system based on these predictions. Construction crews would work in an area until the danger rose, then move to a safer zone while the first location calmed down. It was slow. It was frustrating, but it worked. The radiation storms were a different problem. The shields on their ships could handle most of the bursts, but the construction equipment was more vulnerable. They lost tools, materials, and 3 weeks of work when a particularly strong storm destroyed an entire supply depot. After that disaster changed her approach. Instead of fighting the radiation, she decided to use it. Her team designed collectors that harvested energy from the storms and converted it into power for the construction effort. Within a month, the Expanse was fueling its own transformation. The Federation observation team arrived during the 4th month of construction. Their leader was a bird-like creature named, with sharp eyes and sharper opinions. He made no secret of his belief that the humans were wasting their time. "Your species is young," said during their first meeting. "You do not understand what you are attempting. The Expanse has defeated civilizations that existed when your ancestors were still learning to use fire." Poured him a cup of coffee, a gesture that confused him greatly. "Would you like to see what we have built so far?" She took him on a tour of the construction site. The main structure was already taking shape, a ring station that would eventually house 5,000 people. Support pillars extended outward, anchoring the station to carefully selected asteroids. Shield generators hummed with power stolen from the very storms that should have destroyed them. Was quiet for a long time. "This is impressive," he finally admitted. "But impressive is not the same as possible. The Expanse will destroy this station. It is only a matter of time." 1 month later, the Expanse tried. A radiation surge unlike anything in the recorded data struck the construction zone without warning. The main power core overloaded and exploded. 2 engineers died instantly. 17 others were injured. Half of the station's completed structure was damaged beyond repair. Found standing in the observation deck, staring at the wreckage, he expected tears. He expected defeat. He expected the humans to announce their withdrawal. "I am sorry for your losses," he said carefully. "The Federation will not judge your species harshly for this failure. The Expanse has claimed far greater civilizations." Turned to look at him. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. "We are not leaving." "Did not understand. But your people are dead. Your station is destroyed. You have proven what we already knew. The Expanse cannot be conquered." "We have not proven anything except that we need better power cores." Turned back to the window. "We will mourn our dead. We will repair our station. And we will finish what we started." The funeral was held the next day. Sergeant, head of security, organized the ceremony. The 2 engineers were named, Minu and Bay Sira. Their lives were remembered. Their contributions were honored. Their families on Earth would receive messages and medals, and the small comfort of knowing their loved ones had died doing something that mattered. Then the funeral ended, and the next morning, every single human on the construction fleet returned to work. Watched them with something that might have been confusion or might have been respect. He had seen many species face loss. Most retreated. Some gave up entirely. But these humans simply absorbed the pain and kept moving forward. 14 months later, Endurance Station became operational. It was not beautiful. It was not elegant. But it was there, spinning slowly in the heart of a region that had killed everyone who came before. Stood in the main control room and watched the systems come online one by one. Around her, humans cheered and embraced and cried tears that were not from sadness. They had done something impossible. They had built a home in a place that wanted them dead. The official announcement went out across Federation channels. Humanity declares the Expanse open for business. All species welcome. Trade routes now available. Sent his report to the Federation Council that same day. He included everything he had witnessed: the adaptation, the determination, the refusal to accept defeat even when defeat seemed certain. His conclusion was simple: these humans are not like us. They do not see impossible things the way we do. Where we see endings, they see challenges. Where we see death, they see motivation. I do not know what they will become in the centuries ahead, but I suspect we should be watching very carefully. The council convened an emergency session. Something had changed in the galaxy. They could all feel it. And somewhere in the expanse, humans were already planning what to build next. 3 years after Endurance Station opened its doors, the expanse had become something new, something that made the rest of the galaxy very nervous. Admiral stood in her command center and watched the training exercise unfold on a dozen screens. Outside the reinforced windows, fighter craft danced between radiation bursts and gravitational waves. They moved like nothing she had seen in her 30 years of military service. They moved like predators who had learned to hunt in hell. The Expanse Defense Force had been her idea. When Earth Command asked what humanity should do with their new territory, had given them a simple answer: train. Train harder than anyone had ever trained before. Train in conditions that would kill soldiers from any other species. Train until impossible became routine. Now she was watching the results. Captain Shin led the exercise from the cockpit of his fighter. He had been one of the first pilots assigned to the Expanse, back when everyone thought the assignment was a punishment. Now his squadron was considered the deadliest in human space, and pilots from across Earth's territories begged for a chance to train under him. New recruits entering the gauntlet's voice came through the speakers. Timer starting now. The Gauntlet was humanity's most famous training course, though famous was perhaps not the right word. Infamous might be better. It was a route through the most dangerous section of the Expanse, where gravitational anomalies could crush a ship in seconds, and radiation storms could fry electronics before pilots even knew they were in trouble. Survival rate for first attempts, 34%. That number had been higher when they started but had made the course harder every year. Easy training made weak soldiers. Hard training made survivors. She watched 3 new fighters enter the Gauntlet's opening. They were young pilots, fresh from the academy on Earth, full of confidence and skill, and the absolute certainty that they were ready for anything. The Gauntlet would teach them otherwise. The first gravitational wave hit them 40 seconds in. One pilot adjusted perfectly, riding the wave like a surfer. The second pilot nearly spun into an asteroid. The third pilot panicked and tried to fight the wave directly. His ship was thrown sideways and slammed into a debris field. Rescue team deployed, someone announced calmly. Rescue teams were always standing by. The Gauntlet was not designed to kill pilots, only to break their confidence so it could be rebuilt properly. The surviving 2 pilots continued deeper. A radiation storm appeared ahead, blocking their path. The confident pilot from before hesitated, trying to find a way around. The second pilot, the one who had nearly crashed, flew straight into the storm. Leaned forward slightly. That was interesting. The pilot emerged on the other side with scorched shields and a damaged sensor array. But she emerged. The other pilot was still circling, looking for safety that did not exist. Pilot 2, complete the course, ordered. The hesitating pilot finally moved, but his timing was wrong. The storm had shifted, and his careful path was now more dangerous than the direct route had been. His shields failed halfway through, and his ship went dark. Rescue Team 2 deployed. 1 pilot remained. She navigated the final section of the Gauntlet with growing confidence, learning from each obstacle, adjusting to each surprise. When she emerged at the end, her ship was barely functional, but she was alive. Time recorded, announced. Pilot 3 passes. Pilots 1 and 2 will repeat the course tomorrow. This was how the Expanse Defense Force made warriors. Not through comfort and safety, but through controlled exposure to the worst conditions imaginable. By the time pilots completed 10 successful runs through the Gauntlet, conventional combat felt almost boring. The Federation had begun to notice. Requests arrived almost daily now. Other species wanted to send their officers through human training programs. They wanted to learn how humans did what they did. They wanted to understand the secret. Approved some requests, not all. She wanted the galaxy to respect humanity, but she did not want to give away every advantage they had earned through blood and determination. Instructor No ran the Foreign Officer Program. She was a small woman with a calm voice and eyes that had seen too many students fail. But she was patient, and she was good at explaining things that seemed obvious to humans but confused everyone else. One day, a young officer from a Federation species asked her a question that many others had asked before. "How do you endure this?" the officer said. He was shaking slightly. He had just completed a modified version of the gauntlet, one that was considered safe by human standards. The fear, the danger, the constant possibility of death. How do your people live like this? Considered the question carefully. She had given many answers over the years, but this officer seemed genuinely curious, not just frightened. "We have always lived in places that wanted to kill us," she finally said. "Long before we reached the stars, we survived ice ages, predators, diseases, and disasters that should have ended our species. We learned to fear, and then we learned to function despite the fear." "But this is different," the officer protested. "This is choosing danger. This is seeking out death." "Yes," agreed. "This is the first time we have done it on purpose." The officer did not understand. Perhaps he never would. His species had evolved on a gentle world with stable weather and no predators. They had never needed to develop the relationship with fear that humans carried in their blood. But understanding was not required. Respect was enough. Word spread through the galaxy about what humans were building in the expanse. Some species laughed at first, calling it foolish and wasteful. But as years passed and human military capabilities grew, the laughter faded. It was replaced by something else. Worry, calculation, and in some cases planning. Because the galaxy was not a peaceful place. Resources were limited. Territory was valuable. And somewhere out there, someone was watching humanity rise and wondering if they should stop it before it went too far. Admiral knew this. She had known it from the beginning. That was why she pushed her people so hard. That was why she made the gauntlet more difficult every year. That was why she spent sleepless nights reviewing reports and planning for threats that had not yet appeared. Humanity had found a home in the impossible. Now they needed to be ready to defend it. The day was coming when someone would test them, intended to make sure they passed. The Dominion of had conquered 43 star systems through military supremacy alone. Their warriors were feared across the galaxy. Their ships were designed for one purpose: destruction. Their culture had no word for retreat because no army had ever needed one. War Commander had served the Dominion for 200 cycles. He had personally led the invasions of 17 worlds. He had never lost a battle, never failed an objective, never experienced the shame of watching enemies celebrate victory. When reports reached him about humanity's activities in the expanse, he felt something he had not felt in many decades: curiosity. A young species, barely a century in space, and they had claimed territory that the entire galaxy had abandoned as impossible. More than that, they had turned that territory into a military stronghold. They were training warriors in conditions that would kill soldiers without proper preparation. This was either madness or genius, needed to know which. He brought his fleet to the edge of the expanse and studied the human installations from a safe distance. What he saw impressed him. Multiple stations, connected by transit routes that carved through the chaos. Defense platforms positioned at strategic points. Patrol ships moving in patterns that showed discipline and confidence. But impressive was not the same as strong. Many species looked impressive until they arrived to test them. Sent his message on all channels. "Humans, I am War Commander of the Dominion of. You have claimed territory that belongs to the galaxy. You will surrender your installations and withdraw, or you will face annihilation. You have one cycle to respond." The response came within an hour. Admiral appeared on his screen. She was smaller than he expected, with gray hair and calm eyes. She did not look like a warrior. She looked like someone's grandmother. This confused greatly. War Commander said, "Thank you for your message. Humanity declines your generous offer to surrender. However, we extend an invitation of our own. You are welcome to try taking the expanse. We will not fire first. Please enter at your convenience." Then she smiled slightly and ended the transmission. Stared at the blank screen for a long moment. In 200 cycles of war, no one had ever responded to his threats with what amounted to a polite invitation to attack. Either this human female was insane, or she knew something he did not. He decided she was insane. It was the simpler explanation. "Send the Vanguard fleet," he ordered. 50 ships, full combat readiness. They will secure the first human station and prepare for our arrival. The Vanguard entered the expanse with the confidence of warriors who had never known defeat. Their commander was a veteran of 12 campaigns, experienced and capable. Their crews were trained to perfection. Their ships were armed with weapons that had burned planets. They lasted 72 hours. The first problem was navigation. Systems were designed for normal space, where gravity behaved predictably and radiation stayed within expected ranges. The expanse did not follow these rules. Ships drifted off course. Formations broke apart. Commanders who had coordinated thousands of battles suddenly could not keep their fleets together. The second problem was the environment itself. Radiation storms struck without warning, overwhelming shields that had never been tested against such intensity. Gravitational waves grabbed ships and threw them into debris fields. 3 vessels were crushed by anomalies that their sensors did not detect until it was too late. The third problem was the humans. They did not attack immediately. They watched, they waited, they let the expanse do their work for them. Squadron Leader Park observed the fleet from a concealed position behind an asteroid cluster. His pilots were hungry for combat. They had trained for years in these conditions. They wanted to prove themselves against real enemies. But Admiral had given clear orders: let them suffer first. Let them understand what they have entered, then finish them. 14 ships were lost to environmental hazards before received permission to engage. By that point, the remaining 36 vessels were scattered, damaged, and desperate. Their crews were exhausted from constant emergency maneuvers. Their commanders were arguing with each other over communication channels that human intelligence officers had been monitoring from the beginning. The battle was over almost before it started. Human fighters emerged from hiding places throughout the expanse. They moved through the chaos like fish through water, using gravitational waves for acceleration and radiation storms for cover. Gunners could not track targets that seemed to know exactly where every danger would appear. And his wing disabled 12 vessels in 40 minutes. Other squadrons reported similar success. They tried to form defensive positions, but their formations kept breaking apart as pilots dodged hazards they could barely detect. In the end, only 9 ships escaped the expanse. War Commander's flagship was among them, but barely. His shields were gone. His weapons were damaged. Half his crew was dead or injured. He received Admiral's final transmission as he limped toward the border. "The expanse is ours," she said. Her voice was still calm, still polite. "You are welcome to visit peacefully. Next time we will not be so patient." Had no response. For the first time in his long career, he had nothing to say. The dominion of its challenge formally 3 days later. The message was short and carefully worded, but everyone who read it understood what it meant. They had met a species they could not simply overwhelm. The news spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Humanity had defeated not through superior numbers or advanced technology, but through something else entirely, something that other species struggled to name. Admiral called it adaptability. Captain called it stubbornness. The engineers who had built the Expanse stations called it common sense. The pilots who had trained in the gauntlet called it home field advantage. Whatever it was, the galaxy had learned a valuable lesson. The Expanse was human territory now. Anyone who wanted to change that would have to go through conditions that had already claimed the best warriors the Dominion could offer. And humanity was just getting started. On Endurance Station, celebrations lasted 3 days. Pilots told stories of their kills. Engineers bragged about systems that had worked perfectly under pressure. Even the serious officers allowed themselves to smile. But Admiral did not celebrate for long. She knew they were not the only threat in the galaxy. She knew other species were watching, calculating, planning. Some would learn from this failure. Some would try different approaches. The Expanse was defended for now, but eternal vigilance was the price of survival. Humanity had learned that lesson long ago, back when they were still fighting predators in the grasslands of Earth. Some things never changed, no matter how far you traveled from home. 10 years had passed since humanity first entered the Expanse. In that time, the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Endurance Station had grown into Endurance City. What began as a small ring structure now stretched across dozens of connected platforms, housing over 50,000 permanent residents. 3 additional stations orbited nearby, each serving different purposes: research, commerce, and military training. Transit lanes carved through the chaos connected them all, turning impossible space into busy highways. Director Moon stood in her office overlooking the main research complex. Through the reinforced windows, she could see scientists from 17 different species working together on projects that would have seemed like fantasy a decade ago. They were studying the gravitational anomalies, learning to predict them with near-perfect accuracy. They were harvesting energy from radiation storms with efficiency that improved every year. They were finding new materials in the debris fields, elements that did not exist anywhere else in known space. The Expanse had tried to kill everything that entered it for 40,000 cycles. Now it was giving up its secrets to creatures who refused to be killed. A young researcher knocked on its door. He was from a species called the tall and thin with skin that changed color based on emotion. Right now, his skin was bright yellow, which meant excitement. Director, we have completed the new shield prototype. The efficiency ratings exceed all projections. Smiled, show me. They walked together through corridors filled with activity. Humans and aliens worked side by side, sharing ideas in a dozen different languages. Translation devices hummed constantly, turning confusion into understanding. Arguments broke out sometimes, as they always did when passionate people worked on difficult problems, but solutions followed soon after. This was what the Expanse had become, a place where the galaxy's best minds came to push the boundaries of what was possible. The same conditions that once killed expeditions now accelerated discovery. Researchers who survived the Expanse learned to think differently, to adapt quickly, to accept that today's failure was just tomorrow's lesson. The military academies had expanded as well. Commandant now oversaw a training program that accepted officers from 42 Federation member species. Not all of them completed the program. Some quit after their first day. Others lasted longer but eventually reached limits they could not push past. But those who graduated became some of the most capable warriors in the galaxy. Was teaching a class when walked past the academy building. Through the window, she could see rows of mixed species listening carefully as the commandant explained human military philosophy. "We do not fight to prove we are stronger," was saying. "We fight to prove we are still alive. Every battle is a survival situation. Every enemy is an environmental hazard. When you understand this, you stop seeing combat as a test of power and start seeing it as a problem to solve." The students took notes. Some of them looked confused, others looked thoughtful, a few looked like they were beginning to understand something important. The Federation Council had officially redesignated the expanse 2 years ago. The old label, uninhabitable, no recovery possible, had been replaced with something new, human-administered territory. It was a small change on paper, but it represented something much larger. Humanity had done what the galaxy said could not be done, and now the galaxy had to accept that reality. Not everyone accepted it gracefully. Some species still resented humanity's rise. Some still plotted and planned, looking for weaknesses to exploit. But they did so quietly now, without the confidence that once came from believing humans were just another minor species that would fade into history. Ambassador Lee arrived at Endurance City on the 10th anniversary of humanity's first expedition into the expanse. She had come to deliver a speech to the Federation Council, which was meeting in the expanse for the first time ever. The symbolism was not lost on anyone. The council, gathering in a place they had sworn no one could survive, spent a day touring the facilities before her speech. She visited the research complex, the military academy, the commercial districts where traders from across the galaxy exchanged goods and information. She spoke with humans and aliens alike, listening to their stories, learning what the expanse meant to them. That evening she stood before the council chamber and looked out at representatives from over 200 species. Some were friendly, some were neutral, a few were openly hostile, all of them were paying attention. 10 years ago, humanity received a gift from the Federation, a welcome package containing maps of all known space. We were grateful for this gift. We studied it carefully, and we noticed something interesting. She paused, letting the translation systems carry her words to every corner of the chamber. There was a region marked in red, a place you called the Expanse. The label said, uninhabitable, no recovery possible. 17 expeditions had tried to explore it. None returned. You told us this place was death itself and we should never go there. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. They knew what was coming. You were right, continued. No one had endured there. The Expanse had killed everyone who entered, every ship, every crew, every hopeful explorer who thought they could succeed where others failed. 40,000 cycles of death. That was the record we inherited. She smiled slightly. It was not a mocking smile, but it was not humble either. Humanity read that record and asked a simple question. Why did they fail? Not why did they die, death was obvious. But why did they fail to adapt? Why did they keep trying the same approaches that had already proven deadly? Why did they assume that because something had never been done, it could never be done? The chamber was silent. Even the hostile delegates were listening. We found answers. Each expedition had treated the Expanse as an enemy to conquer rather than an environment to understand. They fought against the chaos instead of learning to work with it. They saw the danger and tried to overpower it instead of adapting to it. Gestured toward the windows, where the swirling colors of the Expanse were visible in the distance. Humanity has a different relationship with hostile environments. We evolved on a planet that tried to kill us constantly. Ice ages, predators, diseases, natural disasters. Our history is written in survival against odds that should have ended our species 1,000 times over. We learned something important from that history. The universe does not care whether we live or die, but we care, and caring is enough. She straightened her back and spoke her final words clearly. The Expanse is not special. It is simply the latest in a long line of impossible places that humanity has made home. There will be others. There will always be others, because that is what we do. We look at places that want us dead and we build homes there anyway. We endure, we adapt, we survive. A pause, a breath. And sometimes, when we are feeling creative, we build shooting ranges. The chamber remained silent for several long seconds after finished speaking. Then, slowly, applause began. Not from everyone. Some delegates sat with crossed arms and cold expressions. But enough. Enough to fill the room with sound. Enough to mark this moment as something important. Outside, the expanse continued its eternal dance of radiation and gravity and chaos. It did not care about the speech or the applause or the species gathered in its heart. It simply existed, beautiful and deadly, as it had for billions of years. But humanity had changed its meaning forever. The impossible had become home, the deadly had become useful, and the galaxy would never look at a red zone on a map the same way again. Somewhere in the research complex, scientists were already planning the next impossible project. Somewhere in the academy, instructors were training the next generation of survivors. Somewhere in the commercial districts, traders were making deals that would have seemed like fantasy 10 years ago. The expanse had said no one endured there. Humanity had answered with cities and academies, and a future that stretched toward infinity. It was, all things considered, a very human response.